So thanks for coming to our work party at the north end of the Seahome Hill Arboretum. How many people have gone this far in Seahome Hill Arboretum? Nobody's ventured this far north yet? While you're at Western Washington, take advantage of having a huge forested area right next to your school or possibly where you're living, because not everyone has a forest where they can relax, they can hike in, you can use the trails to get around and hopefully see some really cool stuff. Well, today we are going to be removing some invasive species. So you might not know what invasive species are, but by the end of today you'll know, and hopefully you'll be able to write a good paper if that's required for your class. So native species are plants that are native to an area. They live there, they're natural, they belong there, there's nothing wrong with those plants, they should be living in the environment. So we're in Bellingham, Western Washington of the United States, and we have lots of native plants here. Lots of green plants, things stay green all year round. What are some native plants that you have seen or heard that we have here in Bellingham or Western Washington? You can shout it out, you can raise your hand. See any around you that look familiar? Any kind of plants you might have heard mentioned in class that you know the name but you don't know what they look like? What about this fern? Does anyone know the name? This green fern, it stays green all year round. So if you see a fern that's green in the winter, there's only one fern it could be, and it begins with an S.
Sword fern.
Sword fern. Yep. So sword fern is a native plant to Bellingham, to Western Washington, to a lot of the western coast. It is called sword fern because each little leaflet on a frond kind of looks like a sword. So this is a bit of a tricky question. One type of blackberry is native to Washington and another isn't. So it's kind of hard to distinguish them unless I could show you both examples and you can see which one is native and not native. But we do have some native blackberry here today. It's called trailing blackberry, but most commonly we find Himalayan blackberry. You might find that in big patches, like if there's a vacant lot by your house. So we actually remove that blackberry bush a lot. So native species, we've got Douglas fir, we've got sword fern. There's a cedar. Anyone remember the whole name of the cedar? Western red cedar. And I don't see an example of that around here. But western red cedar is a really common native plant to Washington. What else? There are big leaf maples and vine maples that are native to Washington. There's another category of plants called invasive species. And today we're going to be working to remove some invasive species. And those are plants that are not native, so they don't belong in Western Washington, don't belong in Bellingham, shouldn't be living here, and they are causing our ecosystem to be imbalanced. And when our ecosystem's imbalanced, it typically means an invasive species. One plant is trying to take over a whole ecosystem. And when that happens, our biodiversity decreases. And so we want our biodiversity to be as high as possible. So we want to have as many different types of plants that are native and they can flourish in our native Western Washington environment. But when an invasive species, a plant from another part of the country, another part of the world, comes in and starts to take over, then it's a problem. Now today we're going to be working on English ivy. So English ivy was brought here from England and it looks pretty. And you've probably seen it all over alongside campus and all over Western Washington. But what it does is it takes away the light, the air, the space, the nutrients, the moisture from native plants. So the native plants can't grow in that environment and the biodiversity decreases because one invasive species is taking over. So we are going to remove that invasive English ivy today. And we'll show you how to do that. And at the end of the day, hopefully you'll be able to write an awesome reflective paper and we can answer your questions along the way about what other plants might be growing by that English ivy that are native, and that we are making space, and those native plants are going to be able to have more light, more nutrients, and more moisture, and just have a happier environment to thrive in. So once everyone gets gloves, we are going to be using this tool. Everyone's going to get one of these if you'd like. You can remove English ivy just by pulling it with your hands. This is called a hori-hori, and it's sharp on both sides. So it would cut my bare finger if I didn't have gloves on. But this is really useful. It digs into the soil really, really, really easily, and you can pry up the roots of the English ivy. Because English ivy is really long, it's a vine, and you follow it back to where it's growing out, and then you pull up the root. And we're going to make a big pile of it here today so that it can be removed by the grounds department at Western Washington, and they're going to compost it. And then once it composts and they get it to a high enough temperature to kill anything that's in it, they'll be able to use that to put back on landscapes and put that biomatter and those nutrients back into the soil.
That's exactly what invasive plants take away. They take away water, take away space, potential sunlight, because like look at how this was just like a network over everything.
Yeah.
So if you're not a taller plant, you're not going to get that sunlight, and you're not going to grow.
You having fun yet?
Yeah.
Is there enough ivy there for you, or do you think
Plenty. Native plant, and it's Oregon grape. So there's a good example right here. If you've been working in any of this, that's Oregon grape. So it's native, it's good for the biodiversity of Bellingham and Western Washington. But there's a plant that looks like it that's similar to Oregon grape. Some people will mistake this spiky plant as Oregon grape. But this one is holly, and it is non-native, and it's from the southeast United States. So it's not native, but it's not invasive, so it's not taking over, it just doesn't belong here. So if you see this spiky plant, we've got some clippers that we can remove that. But the Oregon grape, totally okay, native plant. We want to remove all those invasive species so that the native plants can get the sunlight and the nutrients and the space and the moisture. So if you look on this hillside right now, all I can see is the sword ferns. I don't see the English ivy that was there before. So we've already done an awesome job at making space and allowing the native ferns, the sword ferns, to get the light and the nutrients. English ivy, we are going to send you a thank you email. We definitely appreciate you taking the time to come out here, and hopefully it was beneficial for you personally and for in your classwork and for your future. We send you a survey. There's a link to a survey in that email, and it really helps us if you click on that link and tell us what you thought of the work party. Did you love the location? Did you find that it was helpful to you personally, for you and your class? What would you like to see changed in the future, or was it perfect just as it is?